Well, hello again, everyone. This is Ted Schmidt from Action Coach Northwest, and this is another one of our business community podcasts here for the greater Spokane business community. And today our guest is Luke Baumgarten. He is the founding editor of Range Media, and also the co-founder of Spokane Workers Co-op. So welcome, Luke, and thanks for being on our podcast today.
Thanks, Ted. Happy to be here.
Yeah, sorry I messed that up a little bit. Yeah,
It's all good.
There we go.
All good.
We're all humans, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, Luke, you kind of a unique career you got going on here. So tell us a little bit about what you do.
Yeah, I mean, basically, my career's been really strange and circuitous, but I think fundamentally, I started off as a journalist and sort of talking about our community here, starting mostly as writing about arts and culture in Spokane, and pretty quickly started noticing the problems in addition to, or the things that were missing in addition to the things that were there. And it took a few years, but that led me to start a small arts nonprofit with some friends of mine. And that sort of just kicked off this sort of cycle of, as a journalist, you're sort of paying as much attention as you can to your community. And most journalists sort of keep that remove. But for whatever reason, I felt pulled, and some friends of mine as well did, to start acting in the world. And that led to starting a series of nonprofits and for-profits. And that's all kind of led to this real passion for worker ownership. So what we're currently doing now is two different worker-owned businesses that I'm involved with. One is a small newsroom, a worker-owned cooperative called Range Media that focuses on the needs of audiences that haven't been served by traditional local news media, primarily working class and other sort of marginalized and excluded communities. And secondarily, the Spokane Workers Cooperative, which is actually a worker-owned holding company that the idea is to, over time, buy and convert businesses, largely, focusing on retiring owners. There's a silver tsunami coming up, or already upon us, and trying to figure out, can we transfer, as we're sort of, paying people for their good work and like allowing them to move on into retirement, can we then take the wealth that or the economic engines that these little companies are and sort of transfer that wealth to the owners or to the workers in a form of a cooperative ownership structure.
Oh, excellent. All right. Very interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
So we've got about 8 questions here, kind of to sail through the podcast with you. So here we go. Question 1. If you had to start from square one in business, what would you do differently?
I thought harder about this one than I think I probably should have, or maybe you were intending, but because I think the journey was really revolutionary for me. Like I don't think we would be where I am as a leader without the journey, just because cooperatives are such an unknown thing. But if I were to take that question more straightforward, I think I would have started both empowering and offering ownership to the people I work with sooner. At least in the case of the for-profit businesses I've started, it's been a really powerful, rewarding, in some ways a little bit more difficult, because we also try to do some democratic management stuff. So it's not all command and control, which in some ways complicates the day-to-day problem solving and decision making and stuff. But in the end, I think it creates folks who are a lot more dedicated and who are empowered to think of things I wouldn't have thought of and do things that I wouldn't necessarily do. And that's, I think, led to the overall strength of what we're doing and a lot more buy-in from the folks we work with.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. Okay. Moving right along here. What have your biggest learnings been as an employer since you began in business?
Yeah, I think it ties into that first answer. I think I've found that, like, the folks that, whether it's just me working solo or the folks that are sort of on that like owner tier, I've been blessed to have some really talented folks around me, and that's great. Also, I think that, often workers, people, employees, who aren't always sitting in those management roles and with those decision-making functions have incredible ideas, sometimes for how to solve, discrete tasks that they're doing, or sometimes bigger picture stuff with the totality of the business that, um, obviously I clearly didn't recognize until we started, making space for those voices. And it's, again, another thing that's just been transformational. More brains always helps the problem solving.
Yeah, excellent. So inclusiveness, including
Yeah.
the employees and everything's in more of the decision making and more of the involvement. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And I should say these are all relatively small businesses. So I don't know how well this would scale with, bigger firms, but, yeah, the Spokane Workers Co-op, the board is actually made up of workers, and some of those are just rank and file. Like an animator on our creative team is on the board, and so not somebody
Yeah.
with management experience, but he's got interesting insights and really helps the process.
Yeah. Yeah. More brains. Excellent.
Yeah.
What are some common misconceptions about running a business, and how do you address them?
Man, that's a tough one. I think, with we're doing a media company here, and so and because everybody's trying to, help figure out how to make journalism a going concern again, after the last 20 years. There's philanthropic opportunities, there's earned revenue opportunities, and sometimes people are just a little oblivious about how much human capital costs and what it takes to, attract and retain people. So sometimes we're talking to grantors and they're like, well, shouldn't you be able to do this for this? I'm like, well, not if you want people to stick around. I think that's a really fascinating misconception. Most of the businesses I work in are really, really human capital intensive. They're mostly digital online businesses, or our fellow co-working is we've got the overhead costs of our rent, obviously for the actual physical workspace, but the majority
Mm-hmm.
of the work is in human capital. And so, yeah, it's always fascinating how there's like what you can pay somebody to get them to have a job for a certain period of time. I guess it's kind of like the Costco philosophy, but to pay them well so that they become loyal and actually, I think there's this misconception that if you're just at what the market will bear, that's like the best and the best way you can sort of maximize the spend on that dollar. But we sort of feel like if you can, reward people for their loyalty by paying them more, that pays better dividends than just sort of profit maxing.
Yeah. Do you feel like if when you're paying more, you're going to get better people as well?
In some cases, for sure, and especially when you're, in like the startup nonprofit space that I've done a number of times, like these are good salaries for, maybe for a Spokane general, person, but not something you can get like an executive director level of talent on. And so, yeah, I mean, in those situations for sure. And that's a big problem in the nonprofit sphere in Spokane. Like you've got a lot of founders who do it for the passion and they underpay themselves. And so when it comes time to replace that person because they're retiring or they just need to move on, that can be a pretty big shock to the organization to be like, oh wait, the actual market value of this position is what? Oh God,
Yeah.
So and that's true of like I get to sit on a bunch of boards. I feel pretty fortunate to be able to do that, and that's one of the things that like whenever there's a founder who's like feels guilty paying for themselves or feels stressed that they have to, then they have to make their own salary. Right, that's the job of the executive is to fundraise, and so like both of those things are really tense. And that's one of the arguments I usually use is like what you're doing by paying yourself a living wage or a wage that, you're not going to burn out on. You're also future proofing this organization you love so much. It's not necessarily a benefit to try to always, lean on people's passion, lean on people's, goodwill, especially and that includes the goodwill of a founder by underpaying yourself, because that might get you through this period. But, if something happens to you, especially something unexpected, then that's a risk. That's a significant risk you're taking to this organization you love so much.
Wow. Great insights there. Hope everybody's listening to that one. Okay. All right. Here we go. What do you attribute your growth to?
Yeah, that's another interesting one. Since I've started, I've been part of an arts organization. Fellow was Spokane's first co-working space. Feast World Kitchen. I was really, really lucky to be a founding board member of that. I've never had a day-to-day role in that organization, but I've been, seen the ground floor of that. And then with this little journalism company and this worker-owned holding company, they're all so different. And I don't know if we've figured out we haven't found this exact fit for the holding company quite yet, but with everything else, I think in every example, as disparate as they are, the thing that always contributes to growth is community building. I think that's fundamentally why I've wanted to do the work I do, starting with just being a journalist, is sort of helping people understand the way their community moves and works. And then, each of these things has been a different attempt to solve a problem that I've seen in whatever community we're talking about. And I guess it's like market research is the business school way of saying that. But I think especially with like the co-working space with the media company, there's a bunch of different places to get your news. There's a bunch of different places you could work. What you're trying to do is build something that people will find remarkable enough that they want to come back, whether it's for, the quality of the coffee and the light coming in from the windows, or the particular lens we take on reporting the news. It's about finding the community that like cares about you enough, the market that cares about you enough to think of you as part of their community, as necessary to, if not their day-to-day life, at least their week-to-week life. When things get stressful at home, it's like, okay, cool, I'm not going to work from the home office today. I'm going to come down to Fellow. Or, oh my gosh, this world is so complicated, or this topic is so complicated, I need help understanding it. I'm going to go see if anything's written about it. That's what I really hope our various customer bases do.
Excellent. Yeah. Community, obviously. Awesome. Okay. How do you balance your personal life with the demands of running a business?
I don't know if I do a great job of this, Ted. It's something I'm working on, though, because I think what I've learned, especially as I've gotten older, I've been doing this stuff since my mid-20s, and you have boundless energy in your 20s. And I turned 40 in the pandemic, and I think kind of time stood still. It took me a couple of years to even realize what was going on. And I woke up one day and I'm like, man, I can't work that 10-hour day anymore. Or if I do, I'm really not productive for the last half of it. So I'm just sitting here feeling guilty, or like I haven't gotten enough work done. And so I'm on a journey to understanding this, but I have really been trying to check in with myself and pay attention to when, oh, wow, I'm really creative right now. Is there some correlation to the fact that I like went for a run this morning and got it to have lunch with a buddy, and then came back and actually got more work done today than Thursday? And then I think, everything I do runs on people's passion to some extent or another. And that, can lead to exploitation of, or, at least exploitation of people's passion. Even if you're, compensating people well, it can get a little unhealthy when, you're under the gun for a deadline. So I've also been really trying to check in with like the colleagues that are mirroring me 20 years ago, when I had a 20, in my early 20s, just boundlessly passionate and boundlessly energetic. And I've got a couple colleagues like that right now, and they're like it's been a real moment of growth for me. Like I'm understanding my former self through them to some extent. But then I'll like walk in one day and everyone just kind of has that crazy look on their eye, like, oh, somebody's been up late, or maybe for a couple of days. It's just like, okay, we need to put the brakes. Let's check in. Let's see, like, do we just need to push that deadline a couple of days? Do you need a couple more days on that story or to get this project done? Because the other thing about what we're trying to do with media, and I think this has local media specifically, and I think this has probably some parallels to other forms of business, is the idea that like a work life is a marathon and not a sprint. And what's happening in journalism across America, not just in Spokane, but it's worse in the smaller markets you go and the more local you get, is that we're getting to a point where we used to have, or not even getting to a point, we're well past the point where we used to have journalists who would cover a beat in a town like Spokane for 40 years. And these people would become subject matter experts. I tell the story that there's a long time guy who used to follow political movements in the far right. He covered the Aryan Nation extensively. His name was Bill Moreland. He just passed away a couple of years ago, but he was a long time 35-year reporter at the Spokesman. He knew he didn't know it was Timothy McVeigh, but he knew that some organization that Timothy McVeigh was connected with did the Oklahoma City bombing before the FBI did. Like, that's the power of a journalist who knows his beat. We don't have that anymore. And so what we're trying, and part of that is because we're not paying people well enough and we're working them so hard. They burn out after 2 or 3 years and they go into communications jobs, they go into PR jobs. They just find something that makes their life more livable. Um, and so what really part of what we're trying to do is that long game. Like, if the value is, the trust is, the expertise is, and there's got to be parallels to business in this. It can't just be journalism, that like somebody who's like giving you advice or, talking you through a problem, who's been doing it for 30 years, as long as they're staying nimble and they're paying attention to current events and stuff, and so they're not giving you 30-year-old advice, like that person's just going to have so much better insights and to offer and know the lay of the land, the geography, so much better than somebody who's a second year, been doing it for a couple of years. And so that's really what we're trying to rebuild, is like we're not just trying to build a media company here, a newsroom. We're trying to rebuild the idea of a news career.
Excellent. Okay. All right. So know when to put the brakes on and play the long game, right? Okay.
And it's so hard for me. Yeah. It's the hardest thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. What qualities do you look for in employees, and how do you foster a positive and productive work environment?
I think the positive and productive work environment kind of just stems from empowering people. Like, we get just, and again, this is I'm kind of a control freak. I'm trying to learn to be less of one, and not because it's like the nice thing to do, but it leads to better outcomes when I'm less, letting people live in their creativity, letting people feel a sense of autonomy and purpose. I mean, autonomy, mastery, purpose is kind of a cliche at this point, this Simon Sinek stuff, but it's really true that, for the kinds of businesses we run, giving people enough rope that they can thrive and that they can come back and surprise you with their insights and surprise you with the quality of their work is absolutely essential for us. As for what qualities I look for in employees, it's really fascinating. There are things that I think I'm as good as anybody at. And there are things where I don't even know if I should be in the room when the decision's being made in terms of roles sometimes, because, project management, for example, is something that I've been forced to do at certain points in my career. And I've done it enough that I know that I'm really not good at it. And, so partially that also comes to empowering the folks that do know what to look for. Sometimes it's like, hey, I'll go to if it's a role I've never hired for before, I'll try to find the smartest person who's ever done that job that I know and be like, will you sit in on this? Like, will you help me hire this person? We've actually paid some friends and colleagues of ours in the past to sort of consult on, like, you're the best X I've ever seen. Will you just like sit in and help? Can I just like kind of crawl inside your brain and help make this decision? So I think what I look for, put more simply, it's just like, if I know what the qualities of the role are, I'm pretty confident. But I don't look for any one thing, because I think different jobs require different, not just skill sets, but aptitudes and dispositions. And I think the only way I feel comfortable understanding what's really needed in a role sometimes is by asking a bunch of different people who don't think like me. I really don't think it's useful to replicate yourself 20 times when you're putting people into diverse roles, because we all, even a jack of all trades, master of none, like, you still want people who are than you would if you're sort of just basically randomly, pretty good at a bunch of different stuff. Then it makes sense to hire real rock stars at certain positions. If you're just, exceptional at one thing and hopeless at another, it's like, you better have a plan for hiring the hopelessness, the thing you're hopeless for. And it probably shouldn't just include your, ideas about what would make that person a good thing. So
hire for your weaknesses, right? I hear that a lot. So
yeah.
Okay. Second to last question. We're almost there. So what question should I be asking you that I haven't?
It's a good question. And I want to put this in a way that's like, doesn't feel like I'm just going to be, cheerleading for worker ownership. But I think one of the question that I've been asking myself, and I think it's the question that led me to where I'm at right now. And I really hope that more business owners, business leaders start thinking about it is beyond my nose, right? Beyond what's in front of me with my, my management responsibilities, the company itself. How's the broader um how's the broader economy doing, and how's the broader economy doing for the kinds of people who are like 2 degrees of Kevin Bacon away from my business, right? Even if you're like, no matter how insulated you are, I think regardless of your political outlook, this most recent election showed us that there are a lot of people in this country really suffering, and they're making decisions based on that about who they vote for that they didn't make 4 years, didn't make 8 years ago. And it comes down largely to some real fear and trepidation over the economy. And again, no matter how insulated you are as a B2B business, or, you're up way up the value chain in some, obscure sector, you're basically, so much of the American economy is now based on the consumer sector. And so we're never more than a couple degrees of Kevin Bacon from, consumer concerns, no matter what business we're in. And so I really hope that as a community, business starts thinking more holistically about the work we do as being part of an ecosystem that, yeah, I was lucky enough. I'm the oldest possible millennial, so I got to start my career before the 08 and 09 crisis hit. And the folks
Mm.
that didn't, I'm and I started as a brutally underpaid journalist, I'll say. So I wasn't making money hand over fist to start. I think I'm a decade ahead of some of my peers that are only 4 years younger than me, or 6 years younger than me. Um, and I don't even know, and it just feels like it's even worse for Generation Z as they're coming up, in terms of, you just hear people not even considering the idea of, I bought a house because it was cheaper than renting in 2009. Like that was the real reality in Spokane back then. Now
Yeah.
I don't even I don't I would be shocked if even a third of the folks I know who are in their 20s are even thinking buying a house is going to be an option for them with their career path. And so that's since World War II, since the construction of the creation of the 30-year mortgage and the creation of the suburbs, that's been the major wealth sink for all middle class Americans, is, pensions or some sort of retirement, and the value of their home. So if people can't build that kind of wealth anymore, it might not be us of this generation, but it might be our kids or our grandkids who are really suffering the consequences of that. And so,
Mm.
and I don't think we can wait for government to solve that problem. And again, this is not an anti-government screed. It's just like, look at how little movement in one way or the other seems capable at a federal level. So it's up to us in our individual communities and in our individual, uh, economies to ensure we are as resilient as possible. And for me, especially in a place like Spokane, something that's resilient enough internally that if like things were to fall apart or just to continue to be as bad as they are, we're building we're building resiliency into our local ecosystem and into our local economy, because we clearly aren't building it in the national economy.
Mm. Interesting. Okay. Wow. All right. Some food for thought there.
Yeah.
Okay. Last question. Here we go. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? And any words of advice for other business owners who are looking to grow their businesses?
If I'm not on like doctor ordered bed rest in 5 years, I hope that our news team will be a team of about 15, and we'll be able to cover all of the sort of the major topic areas in Spokane. I think I would hope that the workers co-op we've got about 30 employees across 4 different businesses right now. I'd hope that we would be in the 100 employees range. We really want to sort of, and we offer a sort of a conversion as a service model as well. Like we really want to sort of make it clear that selling to your employees, whether that's through an ESOP or through a worker-owned cooperative, is a smart way to sort of you know make good and, and find a way to retire if you're a small business owner, and also then give back to those employees that help you build the company in a way that will hopefully make our economy more resilient. I think those are the two big things that I hope would happen in 5 years. Um, and I think my advice, this is a really fascinating, the business owner question is really fascinating. I'll assume that people are just starting out more than trying to grow their business, because I'm kind of trying to grow this business right now. So I don't know if I have much advice. Could talk to me in a year or two, but when you're starting out, I think you should do as much as you can to really understand how to run the business, but don't undercapitalize yourself, and do everything you can to maybe overcapitalize a little bit. So as you start working and you really see where the pinch points are, and you get better, you can hire or spend to take care of problems so that you can continue learning. I think a lot of small businesses, and I definitely include our very bootstrappy stuff that we've been doing, we get in a cycle of working in the business and not on the business. And I definitely feel that myself. And what I'm really trying to spend, like this, starting a couple months ago, and continuing until it feels like we've achieved some equilibrium, is finding ways to get myself out of the business, the day to day, so that I can spend time thinking about that spending time actually developing a clear and coherent 5-year strategy, for example. Uh, I think
Yeah.
it's not something, especially if you want to get to it. My dad ended up owning a glass shop for a couple of years, and only ever, had his assistant, and that was what he wanted to do. And that was great for him. Especially though, if you want to grow or you have any sense of scale, even modest scale, you've got to give yourself a lot of time to think about how to make that happen, and run away to
Yeah.
mess up, and pivot and just tweak things, and for things to not go better than you think they might have when you're planning it out. So
Yeah, excellent. Music to my ears there. Work on your business, not in it. I mean, I don't know how many
yeah,
times I've told that to a client.
well,
It's kind of my
easier said than done.
mantra.
Yeah, it's definitely easier said than done, for sure.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Simple, but not easy.
Right,
Simple, but not
right.
easy. Okay. All right. Well, Luke Baumgarten, who is the founder and editor of Range Media and the co-founder of Spokane Co-workers, thank you very much for being our guest today on
Thanks a
our
lot, Ted.
Action Coach Northwest podcast.
Yeah,
And really appreciate it. You had some great insights. And best of luck to you moving forward here. So take care.
thanks, man. I appreciate it.
You bet.